Okay, now that you've seen how to find the max and the min, we're able to graph polynomial equations. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Domain, these are all the x values that are in here, are part of this. And since it is a polynomial and we have no restrictions on it, the domain is negative infinity to infinity. This is for all of them until we put limits on this. So comma, infinity. Okay. Now the range, because this is an odd function, is going to be negative infinity, infinity. Be careful, an even function will have a relative minimum. This does not, excuse me, an absolute minimum. This only has a relative minimum on it. And the graph goes all the way down to negative infinity. So if you put this in your graphic calculator, you can see that it goes from infinity to negative infinity, or negative infinity, infinity. Okay, so with this, let's go ahead and get a graph up here. We had a relative minimum at 0, 0. We had a relative maximum, I think it was at 1.3 roughly, and 2 something. It was like, I don't know. Actually over here, 1.3 up there. Okay, and then we also had a place where it crossed the x-axis known as 0 at 3. And we know the end behavior goes off this way, it goes off this way. So kind of with that, we can get a sketch of our graph. So it kind of goes like that. Okay, and from the calculator you can find your relative minimum, which is going to be at 0, 0. And we had a relative maximum was like at 1.2, 1.2. It's really small, so do the best I can. It's kind of like right there. Remember, this is a sketch, so we're not really overly concerned at your sketch being highly accurate with a point like that. These two need to be fairly accurate. And you also had a 0 at 3. If you look at the graph across the x-axis at 3. Alright, so we had relative max that was at 1.3 comma 1.2. Rounded. Okay. Okay. And we can also, we could look at the graph. Let's go ahead and draw our sketch in here. You can also look at the graph on your calculator. Do a little turn like that. And then boom, down. Okay. My max is off here, but once again, it is a sketch. We're not going to give you anything. We're not going to try to give you anything too crazy and funky and hard to graph, but you can see it. Okay. So let's say we can look at our end behaviors. Let's say if we're on the right side, we're going to start with the right side because it's positive infinity. We're going to negative infinity. It's an odd function. And we're going to infinity on this side. So it's a positive, excuse me, it's a negative odd function. So we're going negative on the right hand side, positive on the left hand side. Now our increasing intervals. Let's do a decreasing intervals first because we're starting over here at negative infinity. And we're going to 0. You can see the graph goes down to 0. Remember, we're only talking about domain or x values, right? So both of these are about x values. So from negative infinity to 0, it is going down as we move across the graph. It's going down. At 0, it increases. And it increases to the maximum. And that maximum is 1.3. And then at 1.3 it turns and starts to decrease again. So we have to union these two together. So for 1.3 to infinity, it's actually decreasing. So x is infinity, is decreasing. So that's how you kind of get the sketch of these. All right. Let's do one more on the next page very quickly here. Okay, so I'll do number 2. You can finish off the last 2 on this page, and you also have a sheet, a worksheet or something to do here. All right. All right, as I said, the domain is negative infinity to infinity. domain on all these. Now the range, this is an even function, so the bottom of this graph is not going to be negative infinity. You actually have to find that point. It is a relative minimum, right? So that one is at negative 1.8, comma, negative 3.3. Oh, it's a decimal point. 3.3. So negative 1.8 is close to there. 1, 2, 3. We'll go ahead and put that in there. If you put this in the graphing calculator, you can find the minimum. You can also see it crosses at about 2-ish. Right about there. And we had another cross at 1, 0. And then it went through 0, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So it goes through there. And then it comes and it goes to the point 1, 3. 1, 2, 3. So it goes to this point. So let's go ahead and put this sketch in here. You pull this right off the graphing calculator. So it looks like that. Something close to that. All right. So now you can see that the domain is down here at the bottom of this relative minimum. So we're going from negative 1.8 to infinity for our range. Okay, we have a relative maximum. We only have one relative maximum here at 0, 5. And then we have another relative minimum over here at this point, which is at 1, 3. We can see our end behavior, since it is a positive function, the right side goes to infinity, and it's even, so the left side goes to infinity. Okay, now we're increasing and decreasing between our maxes and mins. We're starting off with a decrease at negative infinity on the left side of this graph. And we go to our relative minimum, which is at negative 1.8. Remember, we're only talking about domains. Okay, at negative 1.8, it curves and changes directions and goes up to the maximum of 0. So yeah, to 0. That's where it changes direction. And at 0, it decreases again. Clean that up. Okay, so we have the union. And we're going to go from 0. And it's going to go to 1 on a decrease. And then it turns and goes back up. So we're going to union it from 1 to infinity at that point. All right. So that's how you get all this information and you find your sketch of your graph. Try the next 2 on the page and try to practice problems.